had said that he had never lost a battle on land.
Undefeated, never lost.
Okay, until the very end, until he lost. Okay,
Undefeated, never lost.
but on sea, it's a different story. He is not going to do well, especially against his arch nemesis.
Wait, wasn't
Horatio Nelson.
Okay, England and Horatio Nelson.
Oh yes.
wasn't the Borodino or whatever Russia wasn't that
Napoleon
considered
got
a
it.
defeat?
Yeah, that's at the end of his reign.
What? Oh,
Yeah.
so that's like his first defeat.
Well, some people say the Spanish Ulcer, the Peninsula War, was his first one, and then he went to Russia afterward. Okay.
Who's that?
Nelson.
Horatio.
Okay.
I just put Lord Nelson on.
Lord Nelson. Fine.
Spoiler, he dies.
Now,
He died.
this is one of the most epic naval battles in the Napoleonic time. It's a Battle of Trafalgar. If you ever go to London, you have Trafalgar Square, named after this battle. In Trafalgar Square, you have a column named Nelson's Column. It's to memorialize him. Okay, in this battle, it's the English versus the French. Of course, the French is led by Napoleon, and the English led by Napoleon's nemesis, Lord Nelson. Okay, now, in this battle, it is going to be really the defining factor that will help lead to the downfall of Napoleon. Because during this battle, Napoleon finally realizes that he cannot defeat the English. Okay, because in this battle, the English are going to defeat the French. And this is when Napoleon realizes we need to find other ways to defeat the English. Yes.
Why couldn't he defeat them?
They were just too much of a force. They had better generals. They just had better military, and they were just stronger.
He lost.
Okay. Now, now,
Lord Nelson.
Napoleon does get something good out of this. Lord Nelson actually dies during battle. Okay. Lord Nelson had this habit where during his battles, he always had to look like a perfect soldier, and he always wore his medals, like you see here in the painting. Okay, so every time there was an explosion, the light from the explosion kind of beamed off his medals, so it kind of made him a sitting target. And during the fight, during the Battle of Trafalgar, he's actually going to get shot and he eventually dies. Okay, so this is, even though the French are defeated, Napoleon gets a little something out of this. What's wrong with you guys today? You guys are all going crazy today. Okay. Now, generally, when a naval soldier dies at sea, okay, they're buried at sea, meaning their bodies thrown overboard. But Nelson, though, was such a national hero that his soldiers, his naval, his crew, basically said, no, we can't do that. We want him buried on English soil. But the problem is they weren't going to go back to England for many months. So they had to figure out a way to preserve the body. So what they decided to do is they had barrels of alcohol on the ship. Okay, so they took a half-empty barrel of alcohol, put his body in the alcohol, and closed the barrel. Okay, because the alcohol will preserve the body. Okay, yes.
Like alcoholic beverages, or like
Like an alcoholic beverage, yes.
Like rum.
'Cause you got to remember, back then they didn't drink water. They drank wine and beer and alcohol. Okay,
What did the kids drink?
wine, beer, alcohol, and milk.
What about?
Okay, the problem is no one really drank the water because water was impure. It's polluted.
They should boil.
Okay. You can't just boil it and it's okay. You know, just because you take polluted water and you boil it, it's now hot polluted water. Okay. Now, now, okay. So they put the body in the barrel and they continue their fighting and such. And finally, several months later, they finally make it back to England, where when they open the barrel to remove the body, they remove the body. And guess what they find?
A snake.
A baby.
There's no alcohol left. The sailors actually drank the alcohol with the body in it.
Bruh.
That's
Bro,
Full body alcohol. So
No.
And the Oscar goes to
Top 10 bro moments.
the first time.
So- Napoleon says, we cannot defeat, we the French, we cannot defeat the British, so instead of defeating them militarily, they're going to defeat the French by starving them out. Okay? Napoleon is going to create what's called the continental system, and he tells all of Europe, you cannot trade with Great Britain. You cannot send raw materials to Great Britain. You cannot buy British stuff. You cannot export or import anything to or from Britain. This is going to be strike one for Napoleon, leading to his defeat. Because this is very unpopular. This is extremely unpopular. This is horrendously unpopular. Okay? Russia says, wait a second, we make lots of money by sending timber and other things to Britain. Portugal pretty much ignores Napoleon and continues to trade. And Napoleon, his big ego, is like, whoa, 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 you can't tell me no. And he's going to get revenge on Portugal and also Russia. Now, in England now, this actually is a good thing for England because they're going to start focusing and really industrializing heavily. They realize that they have to focus on themselves. They have to take care of themselves. They cannot rely on other people and other factors. So it actually, this is a little bit of a good thing for England. Now, on the other hand, though, to industrialize, they need raw materials. And a lot of the raw materials they got from the continent. So they said, okay, well, let's look in another direction. Let's look westward. There's this new country called America, the United States. About 20 years old by now. And England's like, okay, well, we could probably easily defeat the Americans because they're young, they're these Yankee Doodles, okay? We could defeat them, take all their goods, take all their raw materials, and make them colonies again, and basically, take back for the loss in the American Revolution. So they do that, and Britain declares war with the United States in what's called the War of 1812. This is one of the most interesting wars that no one ever talks about. Yes.
Was it, didn't it like they took over the White House?
They took over
Yeah.
most major cities, yes.
And then they had to escape because I heard a bunch.
Ruin the story.
Spoil it.
Okay. So Britain declares war on the United States.
Didn't we learn about this?
Now you have to understand, the British soldiers are tired from the Napoleonic Wars. So they're tired already. And now they're going to war in the United States. Okay? The British land in Boston and destroy Boston. The United States cannot even hold a candle to the Brits. The Brits march to New York. Okay? They capture New York.
Yeah.
Okay? A little bit longer than Boston because, New York is better.
What is that?
What?
Yeah.
Way too far.
Sorry,
Way
did I-
What about Tampa?
Did I cross the line?
Make a
Cross the
Patriots
line.
joke thing. Hey,
Cross
I have
the line.
miracle.
Patriots joke. They are.
Hey,
Hey,
Oi.
there we go.
Now,
Yes.
Um, Anyway, so
Our city isn't sinking.
okay, so they take over Boston. They march to New York, take over New York. They pillage and plunder. Then the British say, you know what? We can defeat our enemy by taking the capital. Anytime you're in war, if you take your enemy's capital, you pretty much take your enemy. You win the war. So they march to Washington. Okay?
That's a long one.
Not really. Now,
Capital of Philadelphia.
3,000 miles?
no, it's not 3,000 miles.
Washington.
It's a few hundred miles.
It's the entire country.
Okay. Now, so what happens is this. President Madison realizes the British were coming and basically declares a state of emergency in Washington and tells everyone to leave. When the British do come, he escapes from the White House because the British have an idea. They're gonna burn Washington to the ground, and that's exactly what they do. Okay, actually, Madison leaves the White House. His wife stays behind to get all the portraits and everything. But she will eventually escape. Fun little fact about her: Dolly Madison, wife of President Madison, brought something to the United States and made it popular. Does anybody know what it is?
Cupcakes?
No.
Cheese.
No.
Jesus.
It
Slavery.
is dairy.
Yogurt. Ice cream.
Ice cream.
Yes, I got it.
She brought ice cream to the United States and popularized it.
I love it.
She opened the doors of the White House and anybody could walk in and have ice cream at the White House. You know what the most popular flavor was back then?
Chocolate.
Coffee.
Ice cream.
Strawberry.
Beer flavor. Ice cream.
Ice cream flavor.
Vanilla.
It was actually oyster flavor.
Ew.
I love
Oyster.
oysters are awesome.
Good thing they're all dead.
Okay.
I said it like that. I don't like that.
Now, anyway, so Washington is burning to the ground. Now you got to understand, Washington during this time period was made just of wood. All the buildings were made of wood, so it was quite easy to light everything on fire. But here's the thing. We looked like we were losing badly. But Mother Nature comes in. A storm off the Atlantic comes in, and it's heavy winds, heavy rain, etc. We now probably realize it was probably a hurricane. Okay? And it's going to put out the fires. But also, here's the problem. The British burned everything to the ground, so they have no shelter. So during this storm, they're under trees, and they're keeping shelter under trees as things are flying. Who knows? People are flying, cows, whatever are flying. You name it, everything's flying. Okay, and unfortunately for the British, they are going to get so tired that this helps to end the war. And at the end of the War of 1812. It is going to be a truce between the two sides. In this war, there is no winner, there is no loser. We were very close to becoming British citizens again. Okay, if it wasn't for Mother Nature. Now, so the British, this is what the whole War of 1812 was. But now the British are back to being isolated in Europe. Okay, this continental system is going to be considered an epic failure because it does anger a good portion of the continent. Okay, so again, I forgot to mention, during this time period, this is when the war of words really heat up between England and France. Napoleon says that England is just an island of shopkeepers. That was like a major diss. Okay. Basically, he's calling the British just middle class. The British, on the other hand, respond and call Napoleon short. Okay. And believe it or not, that's what has stuck today. Even to this day. Everyone always asks. Every year we talk about Napoleon. Is Napoleon really short? No, he wasn't. He was normal height. For the time period, men were about 5'5". Okay,
Yeah.
that was normal height. For ladies, it was under 5 foot. Okay, if you were 6 foot or taller, man or woman, you'd be considered a giant and abnormal. Okay, so he was, but it was all propaganda.
Imagine being brave at that time.
The British also called Napoleon the spawn of Satan.
Cute.
Napoleon responds by saying, "Hey, look at me. I'm regal. I'm powerful. I'm like a god."
That's the picture.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the picture. Can I put your face on that one?
Whatever you want.
You lose the shot one. You should have picked the picture on the last slide.
Okay. So, Napoleon is going to want to get even. Napoleon's going to want to get even with first Portugal. Okay, because Portugal refused to accept the continental system. So Napoleon asked Spain, the Spanish king at the time, the Bourbon king, can the French go through Spain to get to Portugal? Can the French soldiers go through Spain to get to Portugal? And the Spanish king is like, no, we're not going to allow it. Well, Napoleon goes into Spain anyway, topples the Spanish king, puts his brother on the throne, and then of course the brother allows the French troops to go through Spain. But the problem is, the Spanish people are very unhappy with this move, the toppling of their king and the French troops coming into Spain. Well, this starts a 5-year battle between the French soldiers and the Spanish people. Okay. For the next 5 years, Napoleon is going to send in about 500,000 troops to Spain. But the people want nothing to do with it. They start attacking the French troops. They start causing trouble. Okay. Those of you that have Miss Lejido or Miss Gonzalez, you probably have seen the most famous painting that depicts this. Is by a painter by the name of Goya. He painted Tres de Mayo. Okay, which is, I'll come back to this, don't worry, don't freak out. Which is this painting. I believe Miss Lejido has it on her wall. Or maybe Miss Gonzalez. One of them does. Okay. On the right, you have French soldiers with their guns. On the left, you have the quote-unquote innocent Spaniards. Okay. Yes. Yeah, of course, yeah. Middle Ages.
They're just throwing rocks. For real, perfect fight on the
Okay.
Dead on, right?
Now, the rebellion starts with what's called Dos de Mayo. Okay, where the Spaniards are really putting up a fight with sticks and stones and throwing things and you name it at the troops. Now you may say, well, that's nothing, but you know what? They're so strong that for 5 years the French can't stop them. Okay. Any questions? This is called the Peninsula War. Remember, the objective was for Napoleon to go through Spain to get to Portugal, but he never really gets to Portugal. There is a few battles in Portugal, but for the most part, most of the battles are in Spain. It's called the Peninsula War. This is strike number 2 for Napoleon, leading to his defeat. Because we know 3 strikes, you're out.
Baseball.
Yes. I'm glad bench warmers know that. Okay.
Unless you're arguing 1, 2, 3, out, 1, 2, 3, out, 1, 2, 3.
Okay. Anyway, remember, strike 1 was the continental system. Strike 2 is the Peninsula Wars.
Strike 3 is water.
Now, eventually, after 5 years, Napoleon's like, you know what? I have more grandiose plans. I have better plans, and he withdraws the troops out of Spain. Okay, so some people do consider this as like one of Napoleon's defeats.
How many people died?
Lots.
Okay.
Doesn't matter. Questions.
How many people
Peninsula War.
Spanish ulcer?
Okay.
What is this war called?
Peninsula War.
What is it?
Okay. Okay. Can move on. How many did they say?
Oh, just loaded.
Probably like 20.
Okay. Here's Goya's painting again. There's the Maya. Now this is total propaganda.
It's like the
Okay.
Boston
It's total propaganda. Exactly. That's complex understanding.
Oh.
Okay. Because let's be honest, the Spaniards were not innocent. They were throwing rocks and stuff, boulders and you name it, at the soldiers.
More than 1 million military
That's the picture, Peter.
That's already made.
I'm already up there.
I got you as God.
Okay. Strike number 3. Napoleon realizes. Napoleon says, you know what? Forget about Portugal. They mean nothing. Why don't we go and take care of Russia? Russia is a bad actor.
I have a question.
Russia ignored the continental system. So Napoleon wants to go into Russia. Yes, Skylar.
Complex understanding this, we just talked about where he went to Russia
Yeah.
and lost.
Yeah. At the end of this, we do talk about Hitler's similarities. Because Hitler was a student of history, and he is going to study Napoleon. Because Napoleon was the only other man that has conquered all of Europe in the modern time. And Hitler will do pretty much the exact same thing as Napoleon. How he conquers, what he does with the government, and then eventually his downfall. They're very similar. So, after all the troops come back to Spain, Napoleon says, okay, we're going to raise a grand army of over 600,000 people. And we're going to attack the Russians. Okay? Napoleon was so confident that he was going to be able to attack the Russians that he's like, okay, we're gonna do it in the summer, and we'll be back before it gets cold, and we'll be back way before Christmas. Okay? So his soldiers were not totally prepared for Russian winter because everyone thought it was going to be done. Now, Napoleon had this idea that a country would want to defend their borders. Okay? And he figured that all the fighting would be along the Russian border. But the Russian Tsar had something different. So in July of 1812, Napoleon and his Grand Army basically is going to march from Paris to the border of Russia. Okay? And it takes about a month to walk from Paris to Russia. Okay? And when he gets to the border of Russia, he expects major gunfire, major fight. But there's no one there. In August of 1812, there's no one at the border to meet Napoleon's troops. Well, Tsar Alexander had come up with a plan. The Tsar of Russia knew that there's no way that the Russians could beat the French, Napoleon. So he came up with a different idea. He told all the towns along the border in the route that Napoleon was taking take everything of value, destroy your homes, put salt on the ground so crops can't grow, and leave the area. So when Napoleon gets to the border,